Hey everyone, how are you doing today? We have the wonderful Jonathan Twomley for episode number 2. And if you guys don't know, he is a licensed attorney in the state of New York. And you know what? We are going to talk about this, what's going on with this CDC order. Jonathan and I have talked about it for hours, kind of off record. So we're going to paint the entire story from start to finish and kind of let you know where we think we are at today. So how you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. I'm very disappointed that you didn't call me legendary this time.
Oh, okay.
Only wonderful.
Only wonderful, not legendary. Oh, darn it. Again, you're a legend in my book. So,
So
so
anyway,
Jonathan, let's
yeah, let's talk
let's
about the CDC.
let's
All
set
right.
this thing up. So, I want to go back to the very beginning, right? And just kind of break it down, folks. So I forget when it was. I think it was kind of 9 months ago. This federal organization called the CDC, right, Center for Disease Control,
Control. Yeah.
yeah, came out and issued a nationwide eviction moratorium. You and I talked offline, and as I recall the conversation, went something like this. That's interesting. I didn't
Yeah.
know the CDC had the authority to interact with state commerce. I didn't think the federal government wanted to go against the Fifth Amendment or the taking clause because there is a signed contract between adults. And oh, by the way, we don't think the CDC has ever been granted authority by Congress to do this. Interesting. But we also realized that they'd already done it and it was going to be a long time before people pushed back. But that's kind of what I remember in the beginning. Is that kind of fair?
Yeah. I mean, this was like out of the blue and just shocked everybody for a whole bunch of reasons. One is like, the CDC, like what authority does the CDC have
Mm-hmm.
to get involved in real estate? We'll talk about the basis for it in a minute.
Yeah.
The second thing being like, and it's coming from the Trump administration, right?
Right.
Like,
That's what people may forget. It started back then. Yeah.
yeah, and it was like, what? Like this just, I was just completely floored by this happening, and it was out of the blue, and there was no warning for it.
Yeah.
Now, the justification for it was the idea that you know if people are booted out of their apartments,
Mm-hmm.
then they're going to be spreading COVID. And there was some real evidence behind this that if people were booted out, they were moving in with friends
Yeah.
and
They got
family.
more and more people in a
Yeah,
defined
you have
space.
more
Yeah.
density in small spaces, and
Density. Yeah.
leading to more COVID infections. And I guess that was the kind of hook on which the CDC hung its hat
Right.
to issue this order. And I don't know, and who knows what the inside baseball was there, where because the CDC doesn't act, you know, they couldn't possibly have acted without like President Trump's.
Oh, they were prodded. They didn't do that out of left field for sure.
Yeah. So it just weird. But so that's the hook on which they hung their hat.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is like way outside of the CDC's remit, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And just so people realize, the federal government, right? The CDC is an agency. They have to be empowered by Congress
right
to be able to take action. They've never been given this authority.
yeah, and so I think pretty much everybody across the spectrum, there were people who welcomed it for the effect of it, but I think anybody who was like thinking about this from the perspective of the legality of it was like, there's just no way this is going to stand up to any kind of court scrutiny. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. We've had 3 lower court rulings so far, all of which have found it unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And
So let me stop you right there, because this is something I was saying way back when. Is the CDC was banking on 2 things, in my opinion, right? I'm not an attorney. I'm just a guy who pretends to be one every 7 days or whatever. Just kidding. But basically, the CDC was banking on the fact that the wheels of justice turn slow, right? They knew that they did. I think they knew they did something illegal, but they were trying to buy time. They were trying to buy months because they knew that the wheels of justice would turn slow. So that's the first thing I'm thinking was going on, kind of the inside baseball, to use your analogy. And then the second thing is, I just want to ask a question. Could landlords, in theory, pull together a class action lawsuit nationally against the CDC? Could something like that happen? Or if you don't know, it's okay. But they've hurt many landlords.
yeah, I mean, I could they do this? I guess in theory they could, and they could sue in the DC circuit, and which is the circuit that covers federal agencies.
Mhm.
And so they could bring the suit there. But what they've done instead is a individual,
Yeah.
or groups of landlords in different areas have brought court in their, brought suit in their local federal district court. And so now, we had a ruling yesterday, basically totally consistent, no ambiguity about the rulings. Every court so far has come out and said the CDC did not have authority to do this, independent of how, whatever benefit it brings, COVID wise, it was just beyond the CDC's authority. So a lot of people are obviously happy about this because they think that this is fair and just and right. It also, remember, this is also independent of the authority the states have to do this. So just because this is just about whether the CDC has the authority to do it, not about whether moratoriums are legal or not. That's another fight for another day. But simply on the very narrow, and I think that's why you see people going after this first, because it's a very narrow issue and very easy issue. Right?
Yeah, the wheels of justice turn slow, but if you can find one kind of quick win, which this is, i.e. the CDC doesn't have this authority and never been granted it by Congress, it's kind of the first leg to kick out. But again, it's still so slow for mom and pop landlords who have bills to pay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is the effect of this? Well, the effect of this is that immediately really not much, because I haven't read the orders, but the usual way that this works out is that the lower court doesn't, either doesn't have the authority to or doesn't want to disturb the status quo. So they'll rule that it's unconstitutional, but they will keep the status quo in place pending appeal, because the CDC obviously was going to appeal. It appealed right away.
I'm sure.
This has to go up to the higher courts for determination. So the lower courts don't actually have, like, a ruling by a lower court that something is unconstitutional doesn't have effect. It just is. It's teeing up the issue for the higher courts to then rule on the issue.
And this is why it turns slow and why it's so frustrating as a landlord. There are landlords getting hurt every day by an organization that had no authority, that freaking went against the US Constitution, which I thought was an important document, but apparently not. And right now, this will eventually work up. By the time it works up, the crisis will be over. Landlords will be decimated. And they'll say, oh, CDC, shame on you. You shouldn't have done that. That's what I feel.
Yeah, well, I mean, that may be the case. It's been extended through June, but I think that, we're going to, this issue sort of the economics of the situation may work itself out before the ban is.
Yeah. So I saw a lot.
It also may be the case that, look, the Biden administration has extended the moratorium till June, right? They may not extend it past that. They may look around and say, look, the economy is back. People have gotten their shots, and
I don't think they extend it. I think they know they're getting really close to the end. So I don't think the CD thing. But again, back to the states. The states will still do what the states do. So.
Yeah, and the states, then when people start talking about, is it unconstitutional or not, to do these moratoriums, and then it's the Fifth Amendment, it's a taking. People kind of throw that around a lot, but the takings are very hard to show.
Right? I've talked to a couple of attorneys. They said that's really hard to prove. That's why they're going after the other leg.
Yeah, and so takings, people love to talk about takings, but takings are actually really, really narrow. Like when the government comes and like paves over your front yard to like put in a highway, like that's a taking. But this whole idea of a regulatory taking, this is what it's called, a regulatory taking. It's a theory that like, they've made some regulation, which has now decimated the value of whatever I have of my thing, right? It's a regulatory taking. These cases have never gone anywhere, historically. The courts have been very, very skeptical of those claims, because basically anytime there's a regulation, somebody gets hurt.
Yep.
And if you want to make a taking out of every single regulation, well, there's always going to be somebody whose nose is that somebody's going to get hurt. There's winners and losers in everything the government does. So the regulatory takings thing just doesn't really fly. And the other thing that I think people often forget is that the states have a lot of power, right? The Constitution leaves tremendous power to the states to regulate stuff going on within their own borders, right? And so this issue, because it's a new issue, we've never had, eviction bans before, at least as far as I know. Maybe during World War II they did. It's possible that at that time.
Not that I've looked it up. I haven't seen it before.
That's when like rent control and stuff started. But,
correct.
Rent control has always been upheld by the courts, right? It's state regulation. They completely within their power to do that. States have really, really large authority to regulate the economy within their borders. So, but we'll see about this. This is a new thing. This saying you can't enforce the contract that you made with this person. I suspect that is a much more difficult issue for the courts to
ignore.
To ignore or to kind of work their way through. So I think that we're probably going to see some inconsistent rulings from state to state, depending on how conservative or liberal the courts are in that particular state.
Yeah, and I've talked to a couple of attorneys who are, I guess, Supreme Court knowledge, like historians, maybe. I don't really what the right word. They've never argued in front of the Supreme Court, but they study them as their thing. Right. And what they're telling me is this will probably, something like this will end up in the Supreme Court probably in 24 to 36 months. And it will help clean up some of the inconsistencies or noise around takings. That's what they're telling me.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably true.
Okay.
And I think what you're going to see though, is I think people will be surprised by some of the rulings that come out. I think that you're going to see some states, like state courts, where people would be like, this is a slam dunk. We know it, like there's no way that they're going to uphold eviction moratoriums. And there's going to be a few states that do, that they're going to surprise people. I guarantee you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. California, watch out.
Yeah. But I'm talking about states like, I would not be surprised if you see some state in the South where they courts rule like this is fine, because they're going to be thinking about state power. And like, that's what the issue is, like, and so, I think you'll be surprised, and then we'll see the whole thing go to the Supreme Court eventually, and the Supreme Court is going to determine whether, under the Fifth Amendment, this is
they're gonna
legal or not.
But it's years from now. I mean, and again, this crisis, knock on wood, is long since over. The people have been crushed and decimated. That's back to right when the CDC did this. They knew what they were doing. They were buying time.
Yeah. So I would like to talk a little bit about sort of the effect of the lifting of the bans.
Sure, please.
So, I mean, I think there's sort of I've been seeing a lot of people who are like, listen, people's not paying you rent. Like, you want to be able to get rid of those folks. For sure. Right. This is not what you signed up for. You didn't sign up to be a charity. You signed up to be
a business.
Business. Right. And this is how you make a living. So obviously, you don't want to be, have the government interfering with your ability to get rid of somebody who's not paying you. That being said, I think that a lot of celebration is premature.
Oh, absolutely. I see all that on social media. I'm like, what are you guys doing? This is too early.
Not just that it's going to take time, but I think the other issue is, I think there's a lot of people who sort of are operating in this mental space where it's like, well, the deadbeats are just on my property.
Right.
As soon as I can get rid of them, I'm going to have this flood of qualified tenants lining up to get into my apartments.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of people are going to find is the people coming to apply to live there are the ones who just got booted out of the place next door.
Exactly.
Right. So there may be, I think that a sudden opening of the floodgates of eviction, and then on top of that, you're going to have if you have massive eviction filings in the courts are just going to be overwhelmed, right? It may take months for them to work that caseload down, right? So there's only 8 hours in a day, in a working day, right?
Yeah.
There's only so many eviction cases that they can literally review, and anybody who's ever been to landlord tenant court knows what like a crazy place that is already, right? With them trying to just like cycle through cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine how it's going to be when the floodgates open and every landlord is filing eviction petitions against 10, 15, 20 tenants they've got, and great for the lawyers. The lawyers are going to make a ton of money. You're like, if you're not a landlord tenant lawyer now and you don't, you're thinking about it.
Yeah. You might want to be one for the next 12 months.
Better study up, landlord tenant law in your jurisdiction. But I mean, it's not going to be like this bonanza that people are expecting.
You're right.
A, because it's going to take time. It's really going to take time to grind through it. But B, I think, because like I said, it's not just your property. It's like, if you own, and this is really a C property problem, right?
For the most part,
higher levels, for the most part, right? I mean, there's always a couple of people who game the system at every level, but basically this is like,
agreed.
If you own A or B property, maybe you've got a couple tenants where this has happened. But if the real problem was with the C tenants, because that's who got hurt the hardest, right? Those are the people who lost their jobs. So if you're like in an area with C property and you have, chances are, if you have a big problem with delinquency at your property, so does everybody else in the neighborhood, right? So you're either going to wind up with like, a bunch of tenants with evictions on their records who now are basically disqualified from renting at any place that has any kind of tenant screening process, right? So that's going to lower the number of people who can rent, or landlords are just going to like get people to leave without actually evicting them. They're going to say to them, hey, look, pay me what you owe me, or I'm going to file an eviction on you, or like just leave because you don't want that eviction on your record because you're not going to be able to rent another apartment.
Yeah.
Right? So I think a lot of people are going to be like working stuff out with tenants. They're going to be like letting tenants pay what they can, and just they're going to have to just kind of eat that loss that they had, because they're not going to get that back rent. The tenants most likely don't have it. It's not like they're sitting on the money in the most, there may be some, but for the most part, they haven't been sitting on the money, just not paying you.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to get that back rent. I think a lot of landlords are going to be in the situation, like it or not, where they're going to have to make a decision. Like, am I going to wipe the slate clean with somebody that I think is probably going to pay the rent going forward and just forget about this back rent? Or am I going to like stick to my, guns, like I'm going to get that rent, whatever, or I'm going to get you out. Yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be,
this is where karma is going to come in, right? I've been saying for a long time, right? Some tenants have decided, 12, 13 months ago, and I have one of them that's 11 months now, that they were going to use this cancel rent idea or mantra and frankly be rude and belligerent and, frankly, not good humans to, to landlords. And, it's karma time. So I've had to work out payments with probably 20 different people out of my portfolio. 18 of them, 17 or 18 of them, we just worked it out, right? They were communicating. I could see very clearly that they were impacted by this. Many of them got free or reduced rents. And I would have done this without Gavin Newsom getting in the way. But I have two, one's out already, that chose to be non-good humans. And I hit one of them already with a $30,000 judgment, and I'm going to hit him for every penny. And the other one might be close to 50 grand when I'm all said and done. And believe me, I wouldn't. And Gavin Newsom, you keep your damn 80%. I don't want your money. I'm going to hit this tenant because of the rotten nature that they've been the last 12 months. So
have you, what's the status there? Are you able to, what were you able to file against them for a judgment?
So that's just past rent damage to the property. That's it.
Are you able to evict, or they out, or like what's?
Yeah, one is out already for cause. They did subleasing without. So I found cause, right? And then the other one I haven't been able to. So I'm just waiting. Right, every month's another month. And so eventually we'll get them out. And I'm not. I won't. Yes, Gavin Newsom will. Let's just say it's 50 grand. I'm sure I could fill out the paperwork and go collect 80% from good old Gavin, but nope. My agreement is with me and the tenant. The tenant has decided to be a bad actor, and time will come. So,
Well, keep us posted on how this plays
Yeah.
out.
You got it. Well, I look forward to this. This has been fun. Thank you for educating us on this. What I would tell people on social media, my social media feed, because it's very real estate heavy, went bananas last night. I'm like,
Yeah.
guys, calm down. This is the third time this happened. This is not going to impact us tomorrow, but it is a sign that the trend is moving, and this will be over eventually.
I mean, listen, we're let's put it this way: we're going to be back to normal, right?
Yeah,
by
it's coming.
The end of the year at the latest.
Yeah.
The issue really is going to be for a lot of people is like, are they going to collect that back rent or not? And I suspect that they're not, and
agreed.
they're just going to have to kind of, for better or for worse, just going to have to accept it. And that doesn't make anybody happy. I mean, I would not be happy in that situation, and frankly, might be seriously stressed out about like, well, how am I going to pay my bills without this money? It sucks all around. Let's be clear.
For sure.
But I think also people need to be realistic about it too. And I think, like, look, the economy is booming. You're going to have tenants who can pay coming in eventually, and time to just move on.
Yeah, I think being a landlord next year and the 5 years after that's going to be awesome. The last year and a half, not so much, but the next 5 years is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks, Jonathan.
Absolutely.